having a guy like Chet Holmgren could completely change that organization around. Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to another episode of NBA Now. It's your boy Dom, and we're gonna get right into things here today. So, today, we're talking about Chet Holmgren. Obviously a guy that is looked at to be if not the number one pick in the NBA draft, a high lottery selection in the upcoming NBA draft, and he looks like a star. I think he's gonna come into the league and definitely make a big impact, and has, you know, the opportunity to be one of, if not the best big man in the league, and that's saying something when you have, you know, Jokic, who just won an MVP, you have Embiid, who was just in the MVP race, you have Karl Anthony Towns, who has kind of started to lead the Timberwolves to wins, which if you guys want to see a video on that, make sure you guys let me know in the comments down below. But yeah, Chet Holmgren, you know, he's looking pretty good. He's going to come in to the league. You know, I think his first year he'll come in a little bit skinny and then kind of put on some weight, kind of like a DeAndre Ayton did. You know, we've seen Ayton really bulk up throughout his career as well. But yeah, he's going to come in as a very good offensive player. I think when you look at what he's kind of done in college so far, this is a guy that's averaging 13 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists on one of the best teams in the nation. And obviously, they have a super big game coming up against Duke, which I will have another video related to that game coming up here pretty soon, as I am a Duke guy myself. So that'll definitely be a game I'm going to have to catch. And yeah, I'm very excited to see that game. Yeah, they've got a big game coming up against Duke. It's going to be Banchero versus Holmgren as a big underlying story there. Obviously, guys that I think are the two guys really in consideration for this number one pick, and it really kind of comes down to the team. But Holmgren definitely, he's, you know, I think coming out of high school, he had the case for it, and has definitely, you know, fought to keep that case alive. He, you know, so far I think his highest scoring game was against CMU, where they just dominated that game, and he had 19 points. But when you look at like what he's doing with his blocks per game, something that doesn't come up when you're just looking at that main stats, this is a guy that his lowest blocks he's gotten in the game so far is 2. He's averaging 3.5 blocks per game right now, and he's shooting 38% from 3. So he can stretch the floor, he can block the shots. I think he'll be a pretty versatile defender at that center position. Yeah, I don't know if he's going to be like a Bam Adebayo, and I wouldn't predict that. But, you know, if he gets switched on to like a small forward or something like that, he's going to be able to hold his own. Now against a guard, I think he would definitely struggle. But he does have good lateral quickness and foot speed and stuff like that, where he can kind of keep up with that. Obviously, he's got the length to get the blocks, similar to like an Evan Mobley, where he can kind of cover a lot of room with his wingspan. Now, I think Mobley is by far and away a better defender than Holmgren, and will be a better defender in his career. A guy that also we've kind of seen come into the league as kind of skinny, and I think next year we'll see a much bigger and a very impressive sophomore, Evan Mobley. Obviously, I do have a video on him. You guys can go check that out as well. But yeah, Chet Holmgren, if we want to look at the teams that I think he could come to coming into the league, like I said, he's going to be a top pick, if not the number 1 overall pick. So you have to look at bad teams in the league. Now, one team that comes to mind is the Rockets. They have the worst record in the league. Picking up another win tonight now puts them at 2-16. But they are terrible, at least win-wise. Now, they can be a fun team to watch, and they can make some plays and stuff like that happen. But a big hole for theirs is at center, right? Their starting center is Daniel Tice, who isn't a bad guy or anything like that. But definitely, when you look at that, you see potential that he could work super well on the inside. Then potentially you have a Christian Wood, who can also stretch the floor at the 4. A very good duo there at the center and power forward position. And then you also are going to have Jalen Green, and you're going to have Kevin Porter Jr. out on the as your guards. You kind of got some wings in Jayshawn Tate. You got another guy in Kenyon Martin or KJ Martin. So you've got, you know, a lot of young guys that kind of together, and then you're kind of getting the full thing together. I think, for the Rockets, obviously Sengun shows some potential, but if you get the number 1 overall pick, I think you kind of throw him to the side for Holmgren. And now Sengun might be a pretty decent player in his career. He might be a starting level caliber player. He's had some bright spots early on. But just the potential that Holmgren's going to have to potentially be the best player on your team is something you're just not going to pass up at when that's your biggest need, really. And maybe Sengun can be super good off the bench for them. Obviously, he's got some playmaking ability and stuff like that, so that could help them there. But that would be a super interesting lineup if you're looking at the team with Kevin Porter Jr., with Jalen Green, with Jae'Sean Tate, Christian Wood, and then Holmgren at the 5. And I think it could definitely make noise in the Western Conference here in a couple years, if not in its first year. At least potentially fight for a play-in spot or something like that, because that'd be a talented team that's kind of filled out throughout. Now, there is question on whether Kevin Porter Jr. can truly be your point guard or anything like that. And I think by the end of the season, we might have closer answers to that. And maybe you give him one more season at run at that. And if it doesn't end up working out, maybe, again, you target a point guard or something like that that can kind of run the show for you next to Jalen Green, and Kevin Porter Jr. potentially moves to the bench or whatever. But yeah, they definitely have pieces, and I think this will be a very good landing spot for him. It's not my top landing spot for him, because I think the top landing spot for me, for him to go, is just such an interesting fit. And that's the San Antonio Spurs. Now, the reason they're my top spot is because you've got a DeJounte Murray who's broken out this year. You've got a Derek White who is a pretty serviceable player. You've got Doug McDermott who can stretch the floor. Now Jakob Poeltl has been your center for a few years. Nothing special, but he's kind of he's been an okay Spurs center type of guy, right? You've got, a lot of guards that you've drafted recently, and Devin Vassell and Josh Primo, and all these guys are starting to come into their own. Keldon Johnson will have another year under his belt. And so you've kind of got all that kind of wraps around to that 4 position. But your center position is a glaring hole on this team with Jakob Poeltl as really your only good center on the roster. Now you have Drew Eubanks as well as a bench guy. He's not really a big-time guy. He's kind of smaller at the position as well. And then, obviously, Zach Collins and Thad Young can get some run at center. Now, Zach Collins defensively doesn't work very well there, and Thad Young will most likely be gone after the season, although I could see him re-signing with the Spurs, because he's kind of a Spurs type of player. But if you bring in Chet Holmgren, he's pretty much your next Tim Duncan for the San Antonio Spurs. And then having all this perimeter stuff that you've built up over the past 5 or 6 years that you've gotten kind of a lot of slack for, not targeting anything underneath and big guys and Goga Bitadze and stuff like that. You've targeted wings and all this sort of stuff, and you've gotten kind of slack from that. But if you're able to go out and get a Chet Holmgren, if you're able to jump up in the lottery or whatever, it's not like you're a very good team right now. You're only 4-12 looking at Fanspo. Now that might not be completely up to date, but you're only 4-12, not a fantastic team, one of the worst teams in the Western Conference. You're gonna have a shot to get that top draft pick, and more common than not, we see teams that aren't in that top 3 jump up and get that draft pick. We saw it with the Pelicans, and it's just something that you're gonna have a good opportunity to do so, and why not bring him in? So yeah, they're 4-13 at this moment. 13th, pretty much tied for 13th. Now they haven't played as many games as the Pelicans, but they've both got 4 wins. But yeah, you're just not a very good team. You're not going to make the plan. You're not a super talented team. If you can bring in a number 1 or number 2 overall pick in Chet Holmgren and really have him be your next Tim Duncan, have him grow with Pop at the end of Pop's career, and then maybe you transfer into it, maybe Tim Duncan being your head coach or whatever. I think it would work super well, and especially having Duncan on the not on the roster, but on the coaching staff, he would learn so much in the system. Now, I think this is where he would have his worst rookie season, and my reasoning for that is I feel like sometimes Spurs, people that go to the Spurs or whatever, and especially rookies and stuff like that, they take a year or two to really kind of ingrain themselves into the Spurs system and everything like that. So I think if he went here, he would have his worst rookie season out of any place that he could go. That is realistic at the top here. But I think long term this could be the best fit for him, and the most interesting storyline too, for him to kind of be the Tim Duncan heir apparent and then really bring back San Antonio Spurs basketball, which I think we all San Antonio Spurs, when they have good players, they play beautiful basketball. They have a lot of fundamentals and all that, but they've started to incorporate the three in the more modern game as of recently. And when they're winning, they might not be the most flashy team to watch, but it is good for the league when the Spurs are winning. They won for a long, long time, and for them to get back to that, especially with a guy like Holmgren, I think would be super cool. So I'd be super interested to see him go there, and I think that would personally, for me, be the coolest spot for him to go. Now, some other spots that he could go is OKC, obviously another spot with a glaring hole at center. These top three teams are not very good. Now, OKC is kind of fighting around that play-in spot right now. They're a little ways out of it, as the Nuggets are 9-9 at the 10 spot, and then OKC 6-12. Now, a couple days ago, they were kind of right in there. I think Memphis or Portland kind of started winning again. And kind of separated that lead a little bit more, making all the teams above that, like 9-win teams. But OKC is going to be flirting with that play-in. Maybe, obviously, we could see them do what they did last year, where they start resting the players or whatever, and we just see them tank a little bit farther down. We know OKC is potentially going to have multiple top picks. They could also trade up in the draft if they wanted to get Chet Holmgren. And like I said, they have a glaring hole at center. Derek Favors is really your best center on the roster, probably. And to be honest, I'm not watching OKC games right now because they're just... I mean, I watched one game, and that was where Lou Dort had the game-winning layup or dunk or whatever it was, with those super nice, clean, white OKC jerseys. But, you're probably not going to be a very good team. You're more than likely going to lose a good amount of games. And you're going to be in contention for that top pick and have lots of assets. If you wanted to trade for it, it could be super interesting. Now, if you bring him into the team, you're looking at a team where you're going to have Josh Giddey as your point guard. You're going to have Shai Gilgeous as your shooting guard. You'll have another year under Josh Giddey, who I think has shown some potential. He's struggled a little bit to just kind of put the ball in the basket. But he's going to be a guy that I think will work super well. That's obviously a big backcourt, as we've talked about in the past, I think, throughout the NBA community. And then you have Lou Dort as your three guy, a guy that's kind of really coming into himself here this season and is going to be cheap for the next couple years. Now, I think if he keeps playing where he's at, he's going to warrant a higher contract, but you have the money to pay him. Obviously, you're a team that's kind of taken bad contracts and flipped them for picks and everything like that, but you're one of the lower salaries in the entire league, with the guy making the most money currently being Derek Favors, and obviously next season that will be Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who is on his rookie max extension at that point. But yeah, I think he would work super well on this team because you're going to have Josh Giddey, you're going to have Shai, you have kind of all your perimeter players with Lou Dort also kind of filling that out. And then Darius Bazley's been a super interesting guy with this team. Now, I think if you get a big-time center next to him, that can open up a lot of possibilities for him. And if it's not him, obviously there's Pokusevski, and there is also Isaiah Roby. So you've got some guys at power forward. At center, there's not a whole lot there. Like I said, you've got Derek Favors, you've got Mike Muscala. Obviously, Isaiah Roby's got some run at center. Jeremiah Robinson-Earl has gotten some run at center. But none of these guys are fantastic at center. Or fantastic players overall at this point in their careers. So if you bring in Chet Holmgren, he's going to be a star for you. Again, I think here he would probably have his best rookie season because he's just going to have so much opportunity to just score the ball. And he's going to have such good playmakers with Giddey and Shai on the perimeter, along with shooters around him. I think it would work super well for them. And we could see OKC, I think, immediately jump back into the playoffs. Obviously, Shai has playoff experience and could kind of become a leader for this team next to Holmgren, being a high overall pick or whatever, and it could be super interesting to watch. So I think that rounds out my top three. A couple other teams that we could see, obviously, I think a Cade Cunningham and a Chet Holmgren duo for the Detroit Pistons would be super interesting. Now, they are one of the worst teams in the league as well, at the bottom, or towards the bottom of the Eastern Conference at only 4-14. Orlando, the bottom of the East, I just don't see the fit there. Obviously, you already have Mo Bamba and Wendell Carter Jr. Now, I think Chet Holmgren is much better than the both of them, but I think you really need to target wings, as you have a lot of guards and you've got multiple centers that you can kind of toss out. So I think a wing or something like that would probably be a better target for them. And for some reason, I just don't see them getting the number 1 overall pick or the number 2 overall pick. So they're just not really where I think he's going to end up. And then my kind of final team would be the Sacramento Kings. Obviously, you got rid of Luke Walton. There's a potential trade rumors for De'Aaron Fox, which I made a video on. And if you do end up trading him or whatever, or even if you don't, you have gotten guards the last 2 drafts, along with having De'Aaron Fox. You have Buddy Hield, you have Harrison Barnes, and although you have like a guy like Rashawn Holmes, you don't really have like a big that just is going to light it up for you. You've got Tristan Thompson, Rashawn Holmes, serviceable guys, but nothing insane. And with the potential to be trading a guy like Marvin Bagley here pretty soon, as you're giving him pretty much no run, and you pretty much cut ties with him from the team because he was creating like toxic locker room environment, wasn't healthy, and just wasn't playing great basketball for you. If you can go out and hit on Chet Holmgren and bring him into the roster, he could be a guy that brings back Kings basketball as a strong interior force next to some of these perimeter creators that you have. And I think it would be super interesting to see. I think, you know, the Pistons and the Kings kind of round out my top 5 there. So let me know where you guys think Holmgren's going to end up. I am super interested because I think he's going to be a super good NBA player. And I think undoubtedly within like 3 to 5 years of him being in the league, he'll be a top 5 big in the league. Now, how that bodes for some of the other guys, do I think he's going to really be better than Jokic or an Embiid? I don't think so, but I think you know, a Bam Adebayo or Rudy Gobert or DeAndre Ayton, he's going to be in that like second tier at least within 3 to 5 years, and is definitely going to be a franchise center to the point where we're going to be talking about him a lot, especially once he makes the playoffs, which I think he's a guy that will lead to winning. I just feel like the teams that he's going to end up with, there will be a high chance that he leads to winning and all that with them. Especially, you know, those first 3 teams that I listed. If he goes to OKC, they've got some playoff experience, and they will have taken a few years off. They have assets that if they want to bring in veterans or whatever to round out the roster, they can definitely do that, and they can make stuff happen. And Sam Presti's proven that he's a very good GM for them. If he goes to the Rockets, again, they have a lot of assets. They've got a lot of young players. I think that he would work super well next to Christian Wood. And then if he goes to the Spurs, obviously, the Spurs are a winning culture. They just aren't, you know, a lot of these games, they're just not talented enough to win some of them, even though they're in a lot of these games. I mean, I think I heard a stat the other day where, now this was a few games ago. I think this was like 4 or 5 games ago, where they had led in like the fourth quarter or something of like 90% of their games or something like that, but they weren't winning them because they just at the end of the day didn't have the talent at the end of the game to win it. And having a guy like Chet Holmgren could completely change that organization around and bring them back to where they were for the 2000s and the 2010s and all that. And it would be super interesting to see them good. No matter where he goes, I think it'll be super fun to see him play. And I think him and Banchero are going to be a 1-2 punch coming into this class. Now, I will have a Banchero video coming out within the next couple days, obviously before the Duke-Gonzaga game, so make sure you guys keep a lookout for that if you guys want to see that and see my takes on him. He, I think, is a special player as well. And yeah, I'll talk more on him in that video. So if you guys enjoyed, make sure you guys drop a like, subscribe for more. It's been your boy Dom. I appreciate you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch y'all next time. Peace out, guys.